This is the show for people who know life doesn't happen to you. Life happens, and the impact it has is up to you. Hey, beautiful people. I'm excited for this episode. It's always one of my favorites when I get to bring a special guest on who I know will impact and inspire you. And first and foremost, I have to give a shout out to this guest sister, Jenna, for connecting us. Thanks to the Elevate Foundation, the amazing Women's Leadership Conference I got to speak at the other week. I got to cross paths with Jenna and she shared a little bit about her story, but more importantly about her inspiring sister and all the awesome work that she's doing. And so I connected with this guest and then, well, she wasn't a guest at first, but as soon as I got to connect with her, I was like, you need to come on the show. I want people to hear more about, quote unquote, everyday women, but just doing amazing things in the world. We might not be the big names in the highlight reels, but there's so many women out there doing impactful things, and this is definitely one of them. So without further ado, I'm very excited to bring the wonderful Kara Byron onto the show. Kara,
Thanks
welcome.
for having me, Kate. I'm so happy to be here. This is going to be so fun.
Yes, likewise. I'm so glad you're here. So without me, like I don't like to give away all the fun, amazing stuff. I'll leave that to you. So tell us first and foremost a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure, yeah. I'm Kara. I am a New Jersey native, but I currently live in Los Angeles with my dog and my fiance, on the same street as my sister Jenna. So I
Oh,
feel
you
very
guys live on the
lucky.
same street. I love that so much.
Yes. Yeah, we're about 50 feet apart, so it's
Oh,
it's really beautiful. I feel very lucky.
yeah.
But yeah, so I live out here. I'm loving the California life. I got my master's in social work in 2017. Kind of went through, an interesting life journey. I'm sure we'll get into it
Mhm.
a little bit, and made my way out here in 2020. And currently, I actually own my own business, Moments by Kara, where I get to curate meaningful moments and experiences for private clients and nonprofits and brands, and kind of bring in my flavor of social work and social impact into kind of my everyday work, which has been amazing.
Yeah, because I bet through doing that degree and that, like, you learn so much about connection and people and psycho, like what really makes, I don't know, people
Yeah.
feel seen, heard, felt, all the things.
A
So,
100%. I was always, when I was in school for social work, I was always so curious, what else is out there for social work? I had initially gone in very much on a linear clinical career path and kind of soon realized that through everything that I was learning in the classroom, social workers' skills are super transferable. And you are starting to see social workers, across sectors and industries. And I always wanted to know, how can I merge my love of events, of social impact, and do something a little bit different. And so it's been so wonderful getting to work with, nonprofits and brands more so on program development, events, impact initiatives,
mm,
operations, and whatnot. And then more so with private clients, families, individuals, kind of creating these really special moments and experiences for them and kind of bridging everything that I really love to do. So,
I
yeah.
love that. And we will learn a little bit more about what brought you to that place in a moment, but I have to ask, and I know technically we were not meant to play favorites, but is there a moment or two that you've curated that has just really impacted you in particular?
Yeah, most recently, and more so the reason you and I connected is I got to plan this incredible women's empowerment summit based in New York last fall, and we brought together hundreds of women through one of my nonprofit partners to focus an entire day around wellness and social impact and more so holistic well-being and what that looks like. And, we heard from guests and speakers and workshop facilitators that everyone really left that day feeling extremely inspired, empowered, and that's the ultimate goal is to have people in a space where they can feel that sense of connection, that sense of value, and really take something away from it. So that was definitely a highlight of
Yeah.
2020.
Yeah. I can imagine. And the best is still yet to be this year, with the upcoming one that you've got again. So
Yeah,
I
exactly.
love that. Well, let's dive in because we've kind of been dancing around it, but let's talk about a particular chapter in your life that has really shaped you to be the person that you are today. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I went to undergrad in California out here, I went to USC, and it was during my time here that my dad was diagnosed with a very rare neurodegenerative disease called multiple system atrophy. And that was most of my reason for wanting to go to pursue my master's on the East Coast in New York so that I could be closer. Um, it's a pretty rare condition, and every single person and patient presents so differently. So at the time, we really didn't know what, sort of the prognosis and the timelines and all of those things would look like.
Mhm.
And so you mentioned my sister Jenna. She actually kind of spearheaded what the next kind of couple years would become for myself, my other sister Lexi, my mom, and our family. And she took on the role of being his primary caregiver. And so when I was studying for my master's in New York, I was doing a lot of work. I was back and forth between New Jersey and New York. I was sort of tag teaming with Jenna to really be by his side. And shortly after I graduated from graduate school, I very much realized sort of how much time was left and what was needed in our family. And so I decided to kind of step in with Jenna to become his primary caregiver. 24/7 was really with him. We spent the next couple years building a private duty nursing company where we
Wow.
um, recruited, staffed, trained, 30 ER and ICU nurses and technicians to help, with his care, with his care plan, primarily for him and then also for some other families in the tri-state area at the time.
Wow.
Um, and we, had a beautiful couple years together where we really honed in on this concept of, making moments count. And it was during this time that I knew that there was my love for social work and events during grad school through initiatives that I started and, programs that I got involved in. But taking it into a personal situation at home and with our family was a whole different level. And I started to create these really meaningful moments for my dad and our family, looking at all of his limitations. I was constantly thinking about creative ways that we could um, just elevate and enhance the quality of his life. And so my love of moments and my business today, Moments by Kara, was actually born and inspired by this time with my dad. And it
Mm.
was really challenging and really beautiful at the same time. And it was a chapter that, you know, in my young 20s, I had to sort of shift life expectations and I was on a different path and I had to become okay with that and I was okay with that and I wouldn't change anything for the world and I learned so much during this time, but that period of time really shaped the course of my life and how I live my life and where I am today.
Wow. That's so, well, heartbreakingly beautiful, and it's such a amazing example of, a big part of my message is there are things that are going to happen that inherently aren't good. A lot of people are like, just look for the positives. I'm like, watching, your dad who you love so fiercely fade away and struggle in front of your very eyes. Like, there's no positives within that.
Yeah.
So rather than just trying to find the good, create the good. You become the good thing that happens to your circumstance. And you're such a beautiful example of that. You're like, you looked within yourself about what you could bring to the situation to create the silver linings in it. Don't just look for it, create it. Because so long as you have a purpose a reason to keep going through all the struggle. Like you do find that strength, and I can imagine like even doing your masters throughout, like watching your father battle through that. Part of me is like, how did you even have the mental and emotional bandwidth to
Yeah.
do that? But at the same time, was it something that helped you like channel and find purpose a little? Like, I'm just curious about what that's like throughout all that.
Yeah, definitely. Just one thing that kind of comes to mind as you're talking is my dad's motto was mind over matter.
Mm,
And so he was really the driving force behind how we showed up, how he showed up, his resiliency, his perseverance, his commitment to living life to the fullest. And so in turn, we had to be able to do that.
mm,
And, one of the biggest life lessons that I learned during that time was you you have to try to be the best version for yourself to be and show up for somebody else. And so having that passion for social work and being in my master's program um, was my thing, and it really allowed me this outlet to pursue something that I was so curious and so interested by, and allowed me to experiment with my entrepreneurial side and get involved in new and exciting projects. And then, I'd be able to share those experiences with my dad and come home and really involve him in everything that I was doing.
mm,
Um, and then I will say, when shortly after I graduated, um, the focus really became our time together and how do we, make sure that he's as comfortable and as, you know, loved and
mm,
his quality of life is really there for whatever time he had left. And we really didn't know what that timeline would look like. And
mm,
so um, it was a hard balance to think about just, being in my young 20s and my life taking a different turn in terms of, maybe not going to the corporate world right away or, living, primarily at my parents' house. And I had friends and people in my world whose life's paths were on a different journey.
mhm. Yeah.
But again, like it taught me so much about the meaning of relationships and finding purpose and like filling your life with joy and what really matters. And so I'm so grateful for this chapter and I carry it every day with me and it was just really powerful.
Wow. Yeah, and I can relate to what you're saying about like in your early 20s. Like like was living at home with my parents until like mid to late 20s, honestly, because I also chose to not pursue the corporate career after my sister died and do something that was purpose over paycheck. And so I couldn't like, I would see my friends go on these fancy European trips. I'm like, there is no way. Like right now, I'm not earning that much money, but my life is so full and meaningful. Like I'd experienced happiness before my sister died, but I don't think I'd ever really experienced like fulfillment in a way of like where that meaning and connection really comes together and you feel like I'm here for a reason and I've got like, purposeful work to do for
Yeah.
something that's greater than my own enjoyment in that moment or, my own reasoning. Like you said, you're showing up for your dad. And I'm sure for him, I mean, I can't speak on his behalf, but from what I've read about him, he was always a very strong, determined man. And I can imagine as he lost the ability to do things, I'm sure seeing it live through you and Jenna and Lexi, like just seeing like, no, but these parts of me are still alive
Yeah.
within them. I'm sure that gave him a lot of purpose and strength to keep going too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we spent every waking second together. And so I often tell people like, you know, through his condition, he did lose the ability to speak, to walk, to do all the things, autonomic functions that maybe you and I or the average person doesn't think about on a daily basis. But he did lose the ability to do those things. And so we almost came up with our own form of communication. It's like my dad and I were able to like understand each other and read each other through like a simple eye gaze or just looking at each other or squeezing hands a certain number of times. Like we kind of came up with our own language. And so we, as me and my sisters, we tried to normalize and tried to, make him feel like he had all the individuality and control that he could have
Hmm.
for somebody who was completely, dependent on others
Yeah.
to live. And we wanted to make sure he felt that way. And he was the strongest. He was incredible. And so I always think about the ways that we were able to subtly like have this deep understanding just by looking at each other. And I think that that's just something I carry with me because even now I'm like feel certain things and
Hmm.
feel like my form of communication with him is just mine. So
Yeah. I feel that so much. Like as you're explaining that, I'm like, yeah, it's like when you lose someone, like a big part of death is we have to learn how to love beyond what the eye can see now. Like we have to just more feel it because we're very, in our society, we like to see things and be able to like touch it and feel. And of course, that's beautiful, and we'd give anything to have that back. But I'm just like, it just has forced my own creativity in the way that I love and connect with
yeah.
my sister. And it is. I'm sure there's moments where you'd give anything to talk to your dad again. But I'm like, if I just close my eyes, I can hear her. Like, I know exactly what she'd tell me. Like,
Yeah.
we already can feel and know that. Like, we've integrated the best parts of them through us. And I think that, yeah, that's kind of the way that love is eternal. Like, people kind of roll their eyes at that, but it absolutely is because they might be gone physically, but that connection, like, definitely lives on. So,
1,000%. I feel like, you know, I don't know, some people do, some people don't. I get signs sometimes from
mm,
him in the things that were meaningful to us in times that I really need it. And like you said, there's so many times where I feel like I just want to tell him what's going on. I want to update him on my life. I want to get his advice. I want him to be my sounding board, all of these things. And for some reason, it just must be, I don't know, it just must be the love that we have is he's there through signs and I think about him every day and
yeah.
through decisions that I make and I know that he's, right there with me. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh no. Sometimes my sister, she's not subtle. She kind of screams at me sometimes. I'm like, oh my gosh. I always like I think about I got my so this the latest book that I've written was a kind of huge deal for me. I've written a couple others for teens and I love them, but they were kind of more just typical advice you'd get. But
Yeah.
this book is like so much of my story and my heart and my pain woven through it. And I always thought one day I'd love to write a book about that. But it's so easy to put it off, and oh, I'm not ready, and no one wants to hear it, and all that stuff. And then on the 10-year anniversary of Nicole's death, the publisher's email like landed in my inbox. And I was like, I
Wow.
feel like she's just nudging me from above. And there's certain things where I'm like, I don't think I'm ready for this. And then boom,
Yeah.
she'll be like, ready or not, here you go. And I'm like, ah.
Amazing.
So yeah, but there is so much like, and again, it's a cliche, but I do think like sometimes those who shine the brightest, burn the fastest, but like they're here for, I really do genuinely believe my sister in her own, like, was meant to be here for 24 years because that impact that she's had on so many people's lives now have helped us live more meaningfully. And so, of course, if I had the ability to rewrite it, I would, but in the same way. And perhaps you can relate. Like I've had people because my I talk about how amazing and meaningful and like purposeful my life now feels. I've actually had someone ask, if you could change your sister's death, then would you? And I'm like, well, 1,000% I'd want her here with me, but I would genuinely ask the universe, like, I will take my sister back, but please still give me some sort of adversity that
Yeah.
wakes me up, that makes me reprioritize my life and what really
Yeah.
matters. I don't want to go back to the girl I was before
Yeah.
because of everything I've learned since.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying and your perspective. And I think there's always going to be things that are out of our control. There's always going to be some tragedy, adversity,
Hmm.
and so forth. And I think it's about, when in life and when in your circumstances this might happen to you, but then also the lessons that you take from it and the perspective and, you know, values that you learn from it. Because again, like there are going to be things in your life that are out of control. You can only control so much. And so if you hold on to that and you let it sit in your body, it's not going to serve you.
Hmm.
Whereas you can equip yourself with the tools, the strategies, the coping mechanisms to be able to move through adversity, or how do you take that and and what do you do next with it and how do you learn from it? Not to say that all the feelings, the sadness, the loss, the grief, the pain, all of that goes away. It doesn't.
Hmm.
But it's more so how you move through it and how
Yeah.
you perceive it and all of those things. But I agree with you. I think that sadly, and truthfully, most people will experience some level of adversity.
Hmm.
And I think that's really important. And for me, mine and this chapter shook me to my core, but it also allowed me to rise in a way, and feel full and whole. And it took a long time to feel that. And it sounds kind of similar to your story and your journey. And it takes a lot of work to be able to get there.
Mm.
But there's always another side to it. It's
Yeah.
like people always say there's always light at the end of the tunnel. And in the moment, it's so hard to think that and to even, feel that as a possibility. But
Yeah.
when you eventually get there and you can feel it, then it's true. It
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah, because there is in recent years, the phenomenon. I can never say that word. I don't know. It always gets me. But anyway, basically, there's a huge area of study now around post-traumatic growth, and I remember I read this amazing book, What Doesn't Kill Us. Um, and the important thing though, like just about how people, do end up experiencing more rich, meaningful lives, not in spite of the bad things that have happened to them, but because of them. But a lot of people, like what I always have to explain is post traumatic growth is an extension of post traumatic stress. You
Mhm.
have to go through the darkness first in order to get to the growth. And I think a lot of people is, I just want to skip the darkness and the stress and the struggle. And it's like, no, 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 that's what teaches you what you need to learn. And you sometimes, I feel like I do step back into the tunnel a little, like, because the analogy that you gave about the tunnel, I completely relate. But I think at first you feel like you've landed in a black hole where there's just absolutely no way out of it. And so it does take time to realize it's a tunnel, but no one else can take those steps towards the light
Yeah.
but you.
Yeah. I hear you, and I felt the same exact way. It's like, we talk about when you're going through a stressful moment or something is happening, you go into fight or flight mode and a dark place, and your body and your mind and everything is filled with all of these different feelings and emotions. There's anger, like why did this have to happen? Like that this doesn't feel right. I'm really this is terrible. There's sadness, there's grief, there's loss. There's maybe guilt about time and things like that. And so you really have to process everything,
Mhm.
and it takes so much time. And the thing is that grief cycle, so to speak, never really fully goes away. Like I mentioned before, it's just kind of going through those motions. And when something and a feeling comes up, kind of acknowledging it
Mhm.
and kind of like you share too, reflecting on it and maybe redirecting
Yeah.
into space, into a new, mental thought. But
Yeah. Yeah. Or even like for me, it's not trying to get rid of the grief, it's redirecting and reframing the way that I relate to my grief and think about it. So in my mind, I'm at a place now because it's been 12 years since Nicole passed, and I think it's an honor and a privilege now. I get to grieve my sister. Like I love that. It's not like after 10 years I wake up and I don't feel anything at the fact she's gone. That would be the worst feeling in the world, to not feel the grief of her absence. And so I try and honor it as this sacred space. And yes, it's painful and hard to go into, but I love that that driver who killed her, he could take her, but he can't take the love, and it's always going to be there because grief, is the birthplace like of love. Like it's all intertwined. So
Yeah.
there's never going to come a day where we're going to stop loving them. So there will never come a day where we'll stop grieving them. But I've just tried to almost, yeah, I think it's like a sacred thing now for me that connects me to my sister in a bittersweet kind of way.
Somebody once told me or shared with me the analogy of grief being like an ocean.
Mm.
There's sometimes it's less wavy or less choppy, and it could be a beautiful day on the water, on the beach, wherever you're around this body of water. Some days there could be a tsunami or a very extremely rough day. And
Yeah.
so grief is like, it comes and you move through it, but then you kind of go to the other side of it. And grief for me doesn't always have to be, yes, it's sad. Yes, I cry a lot. Yes, I reflect a lot. But there's also a lot of beauty in it too. Like I love, you know, telling stories or sharing memories or,
Mhm.
looking at videos and just really keeping his energy and his feeling alive. And so, I laugh a lot at videos and fun things that I remember.
Yeah.
But I completely agree with you that it's like this, it's never going to go away
Hmm.
ever. And so that means that your love is so strong and that it will always be there.
Yeah.
And I know that it will always be there. So
Yeah.
I completely feel the same way.
Yeah. And I love what you said. Like, it's not always the like sadness. It can, in a way, like, because my sister was like born a dancer, never keep her feet still, first and last on every dance floor, and always killed it too. That was me. And then she'd be like tearing it up. So now, like, I even remember in the Elevate Foundation, they had a ladies' night. So I was like the keynote speaker, all put together, like being proper. And then they had a dance floor in the evening. I'm up on the stage, like breaking it
Yeah,
down. They're like, whoa, it's just the
up
same
front and
person.
center.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm doing this with and for my sister. Like, I don't care what anyone thinks. She doesn't get to dance anymore. I do. Like there is ways like you suddenly find more meaning in some mundane things just because you know what that meant to the person, and it's almost like you get to do it with them and for them. And yes, sometimes I end up crying and dancing both at once, but sometimes I do just get the joy of like, oh,
Yeah,
that makes me feel so alive and so connected to her. So it's
yeah.
special.
No, I love that. I love that you shared that. It's kind of this feeling of like, just exactly like you said, they don't get to do it anymore, so let's do it and let's
Mhm.
live life and let's, do these experiences and not take time for granted. So I really appreciate
Yeah.
that you said that.
Absolutely. So I do have a question. This is like rewinding a little bit, but I'm sure there's people listening who, unfortunately, are in similar circumstances where perhaps they're taking care of a loved one, like a full-time carer, whether it's aging parents or just sick kids, and that's a lot on you. And so I want to ask about what was your practice for self-care and like taking care of yourself and your own emotions and everything during that time?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I often think about specifically young people who are taking on that responsibility because I always like to not impart my experience on them, but more so just share if they're open to it or if they ask for some guidance. Um, my self-care needed a lot of work at that time because it was really hard to leave my dad, and I knew that when I wasn't physically with him, he was in the best hands possible, which gave me that peace of mind. But I would say in terms of self-care, just separating myself for a little bit, whether that was, going back to my apartment in New York for a night or 2 nights, seeing friends when I could, going running. Running was a huge outlet for me.
Mm.
It just made me feel, obviously, just working out and feeling good and getting fresh air and being outside. It was just an amazing feeling. I loved running. I always felt like I could really have my thoughts free flowing during my runs. It was like my time to think and like reflect on certain things. And I always got my most creative ideas on my runs. And maybe the best part about it was most often, like more times than not, my dad was actually, he would wait at the end of, we lived on a cul-de-sac, so he would wait at the end of the street outside the
Oh,
driveway for when I would run down and just like finish my run. And it was just such a good feeling. But it definitely took a lot of time to get comfortable and familiar with the idea of like practicing self-care because like I said at the beginning of our call, you can really only show up and be the best version for someone else when you are for yourself. So it was a constant practice and thought that I had to like wire into my brain. Um,
redirector, yes.
Easier said than done.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I would say, find whatever feels most grounding and most I don't know, it gives you the most release for your own self, whether
Mhm.
that's working out, a form of, exercise, a class, going for a walk,
Seeing
doing
a
art. I
friend,
don't know,
yeah.
whatever. Yes,
Yeah.
having a glass of wine, seeing friends, whatever makes you feel like you can just kind of let loose for a moment,
Yeah.
and try your best to not forget about it, but just maybe let the responsibility roll off your shoulders for just a couple minutes and
Yeah.
focus on just you.
Yeah. Remember who you are beyond the identity of being a caretaker or, that kind of thing. It's like put
Yeah,
that hat off just for a moment and detach a little.
yeah,
Because I just wanted to mention that because I'm sure there's a lot of people that struggle with the guilt and it's just remembering too, it's, some days you might not get the full run in, but go out for a 10-minute walk, do something for yourself because, as they say, you can't pour from an empty cup. But if you can remember, the more you fill yourself up, the more that you have to give that person that you're
yeah,
caring for is so important. And when you do it, try and really be where your feet are. You don't want to
yeah.
be there, but then worrying about all the things back at home.
Yeah, it's really hard to do, but looking back, I wish I did more of it, but I think that it's what will get you through that time and also allow you to sustain and also kind of cultivate your own sense of identity during this time because when you are a primary caregiver, and you are spending mostly 24/7 of your time with this person, your life becomes very intertwined with one another in the most beautiful way. But at the same time, really focusing on those hobbies and those passions and things you're curious about and things that you're interested in, it's so important, so that you can feel your sense of purpose beyond
Yeah.
caretaking.
Hmm.
And so that's what I would share with people who may be in a similar,
Love it. Thank you. Yeah.
situation.
Super powerful. And you mentioned to me that you feel like there's a difference between moving on and moving forward. So
Yeah.
tell me how you see them as differently and why that matters.
Yeah, it feels similar to the grief conversation, sort of, but um, you never really move on from your loss, meaning that it's always going to keep coming up through memories, through other losses that you have, through really big life milestones that occur. You're always going to be in my particular, situation, thinking of my dad through all of life's moments. And so while you can move on maybe from the tragedy in and of itself and try to sort of reframe that and find meaning in the tragedy and like I don't know. It's a really hard concept to think about because for me, I like to say that I am moving through. I have been moving through the pain, the grief, the loss, and finding meaning in life and fulfillment. And I just say that I try not to look at it as moving on because I never want to forget him. I know I will never forget him. And
Yeah.
I do my very best. We all do, everybody in my family, my sisters, my mom, to keep his spirit, his memory, his everything alive and to keep talking about him and to keep sharing stories because no one's ever moving on from him. We could move on from a period of time, sure.
Yeah.
Um, but to me, it's really important to keep that energy alive and to try to move through it with grace and to I don't know, just move through life with being able to acknowledge the feelings when they come and
Yeah.
getting through them to the other side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of was visualizing like, if he's here, which people can't see if they're not watching the video, but it's like you're not leaving him back on that day and never like it's like
Right.
you almost like piggyback him on you. It's like you're moving what you have left of him, his energy, his essence, his legacy with you as you move forward. It's not like you're leaving it, like you're not moving on from all of that. But yeah, I think, and anyone, I think whose lives have been rocked by grief, touched by grief, living with grief, I'm sure they can relate when you're able to get to that place where, you have that ability to integrate. I think it takes time. But I do think you can move on from that place initially. Like I remember when Nicole first, I was just so mad at the world. I was like, why is everyone not crying? Why are you smiling? Like, how is the, supermarkets and shopping centers still going? Like, doesn't everyone know like, I think you're able to move on, thankfully, from that place of not really being able to function, but you're not
Yeah.
moving on from them when you start living. It's like you integrated them into your living. So,
Yeah. I really appreciate the way that you put that because I think it resonates a lot with me. I it takes a lot of time, like you said, to move on from that moment,
yeah,
when he died and that place that we were living in and like emotionally I meant living in. And you don't want to necessarily suppress all those feelings and emotions because it's only going to come back later in time in different ways. And so just giving yourself grace as you go through that period of time and moving on with his legacy and his
yeah,
spirit. Um,
yeah,
yeah, it's two different moments in time. I think back, to that period and to that specific time, and I just move through it and
yeah,
about him in different ways. So
yeah.
it's very hard to do, but it's really important.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because we've both experienced grief, but we both have like a different version of it because yours was like I can imagine like your whole life for a couple years was taking care of your dad and coming to terms with everything. And so I can imagine once he passed, it's almost like, wait, what do I do with my day? That was so full of him for so long. Well, on my side, it was like 1 second my sister was here, the next second my brain's like, wait, what? Like she's gone. And so it's that. And I don't think there's a better either all in all of that. But I just thought for you, like, wow, once he went, it was like I can imagine it took a moment to be like, what do I want to do with my life now?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I don't think in the moment I thought about this maybe through those months or through the years, but soon learned you're grieving the entire process. As his condition progressed and getting worse, you're grieving a sense of loss through that whole time. Every time
Yeah.
he changes or there was, something that happened. Um, it's not how my brain, thought about it at the time because we were just trying to sort of, live life and do fun things as a family. But looking back, you're grieving for a long time and then the grief becomes different after. And for me particularly, as a primary caregiver, I did ask those questions a lot and it took a long time to come to terms with it and to kind of find my own. It's like what's meant for me after? Like where do I go from here? How do I move on without or move through and, find my next thing without my dad? Like this has been my world and my life for these last couple of years. And so it was obviously an extremely tragic loss, and loss is tragic any way that you look at it. But my life was definitely flipped upside down, and I was just kind of figuring that out for a while. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking about like so often I haven't personally, most of my losses have been quite sudden. Like my grandfather, who's my next close, like he died of a heart, like I was there the day before, died of a heart attack. Like things have always, my losses have always been like whiplash.
Oh
And
my
so
God.
I just like, and I know unfortunately probably there's going to come a day where it will be a slower one. And so I actually, and I don't apologize for this because I believe losing fur babies is like losing a part of the family too. And
I have
yes.
a baby. She's my whole world.
Yes,
My
I've seen her hanging out in the background. But I think like seeing I had my 14 so for my 14th birthday we got Cooper and him and Nicole were as thick as thieves and um he passed away a couple months before our wedding back in Australia. He died at 16. And so I slowly, and I didn't get to see him for 2 years when I left for the US. I wasn't sure if I was ever going to see him again. So, oh my gosh, that was, I was like, bye, mom and dad, and then saying goodbye to
Oh my
Cooper. It
God.
was like, but then he was still going when I got back 2 years later, but he wasn't him like Cooper anymore. He
Yeah.
definitely outlived it. And so I think that's probably the slowest goodbye that I've had so far. But I appreciate you sharing your experience because, not that you can ever, you can try and prepare for the loss of a loved one as much as you want. And then it happens and it's
Yeah.
every bit as hard and awful as it's going to be. But yeah, I just really appreciate your genuineness and honesty and everything today. And I think what let me think of a fun question to finish. What's something that is there a book you've read or a person you followed or like someone like that you're like, hey, if I could give you one thing to check out beyond this podcast that I found super helpful through my journey, what would you say that is? Or who that is?
That's a really good question. There's been so many like moments in time where I'll see, whether it's a quote or
Mm.
or listen to a podcast or something like that. I feel like I see that all the time. I probably get targeted for it too.
Me too.
Um, that's a really good question though. I don't know if there's one person that I would think to in as it relates to maybe grief or loss. I mean, there's so many. There's books that I've read, there's podcasts that I've listened to. I did do a podcast um actually closer to when my dad passed away. I think I mentioned that to you that it just felt very therapeutic to do, which was
Mm.
such a nice opportunity. But I will say finding your people, I mean, not somebody out there or an author or something like that, but your people who are in your circle, and I always say this, are those that you're going to want to lean on and count on during these times. And so my most raw and honest and authentic conversations are, with those people, and they've known me, most of my life through very important chapters in my life. Most, pre-dad getting sick, during that time, after that time, and now where I'm at in life. And so I personally feel like the most meaning that I get and the best kind of guidance and support is really from those people who know me, accept me at kind of all my feelings and all my emotions. And I feel so lucky to have them in my corner.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, you definitely need people that can hold the space for the mess of it all and then get you back to your best and then you're back to a mess and then they get you like such
Roller
is life.
coaster.
Yeah. Okay, so give your website and such a shout out again because if anyone's been listening and maybe going through a tough time or about to plan something really special for a loved one or an event and they're like, hey, I'd love to check out your stuff, where would they find out more?
momentsbykara.com. And they can reach out on the website. They can reach out on Instagram, anything. I can give you my information too when we finish up if you want to kind of tag it along with,
Yeah, I'll put it all in the show notes and stuff like the links and that.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Again, as I said, like I think these just down to earth, real life kind of conversations are so needed. So I'm sure there's people that have gained so much from listening. So thank you again for showing up and being you. And I hope we get to meet in person one day soon.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on. I said it before, I'll say it again. This is also extremely therapeutic to me. I am such a people person and I love connecting with just new folks and new people who, have shared passions and stuff. So thank you for taking the time to meet with me and I hope we can collaborate and, meet
Yeah,
in person soon. So thank you.
absolutely, Kara. All right, everyone, go and enjoy your day. Hey, you, thanks so much for tuning into this show. If you enjoyed listening along, but you're still thinking, Kate, how do I actually put all of this into practice in my own life with my own situations? I totally get it. This stuff is somewhat simple in theory, but a lot harder in practice, which is why I offer one-on-one personalized life coaching for women just like you who are ready to get unstuck, end the overwhelm, and take back control of their life. That's right, I know that's you. Let's get back to creating a life, body, relationship, and career that you love. Visit kategladden.com for more details on how we can coach together. And for extra inspiration in between episodes, make sure you join me on Instagram. It's at Kate Gladden.